Hello, this is Dan Critchfield, and today we're going to do a Power Tech course. This is going to be on onboard programming. This is at the Chapter 4 at the expert level. Again, this is a Power Tech course really designed for somebody to go ahead and be able to use once they become trained with this. They can use this in a power technical training with our dealers and technical people. Really focused for a 2-hour course, but you can see when we get through this, it has quite a bit of detail into it, and it may be a little longer, or you could take stuff out, use it shorter as well. So this is again a Chapter 4. It is at that expert level, really designed to help others to be able to have material to train out others in the field. So some of the learning objectives here. Go back. Learning objectives is that first we're going to look at the joystick settings on both the CJSM1 and the CJSM2 joysticks, as well as the Omni and the Omni 2 have settings that you can get into directly from the user, can get into those settings. We'll also talk about the onboard programming for the joystick. We'll talk about how to get into the key sequence, how to get into onboard programming. We'll talk about the programming menus that are available. We'll go into detail a little bit about the differences between global parameters and profile parameters. Spend some time on modes and the different modes. And then we're going to go through a step-by-step how to set up a joystick in a method that seems very straightforward to myself. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Then we'll talk about standby. When we get done with that, we're going to switch over to the Omni. And we're going to go into Omni onboard programming as well. We're going to talk about the input devices that are available and how to set up the various input devices. And then we're going to go through, just like on the joystick, we're going to go through setting up a head array, which is one of the most common and can be difficult ways of especially inputs to use. So we want to be able to go through that as well. So what do you need for this training course? For you to be out into the field, what are you going to need? Well, first of all, obviously you need a Sunrise power chair. It does need to have the RNet electronics, because we are onboard programming only works with the RNet electronics. The VR2 electronics requires you to have a handheld programmer, and so therefore this will not apply. You do need some type of color joysticks. I would recommend having both a CJSM1 and a CJSM2. That way you can demonstrate the differences and similarities between those two and how to do the onboard programming with those two devices. An Omni or an Omni 2 is also going to be needed, because we are going to do the programming with the specialty input devices. And of course, you will need a specialty input device to plug into that. That's really, any specialty input device will work. I am going to go through using a head array by using a small 4-way switch to simulate that. You can use that, or you can just use a head array as well. And then you will need a single switch of some type, any mechanical, buddy button, egg switch, pico switch, anything like those that is a single switch that is mechanical will also be needed. And that's really it. You do not need to have a dongle. You do not need a PC. You do not need any other program to do this. All of these settings will be done directly through the actual input device, either the joystick or the Omni. So it is really a good way to go ahead and introduce people into the programming aspects without having to stumble through and try to figure out how to use a dongle in the PC program and doing all these downloads. Everything is built into the displays, and you can get to just about everything you would normally need to. There are some custom things you can do with the PC programs, but this is all we're going to focus on in this 2-hour training course. Go ahead and jump into the joystick settings itself. Now, the joystick settings are those settings, again, that the user can get into themselves. Now, on the CJSM1, okay, the standard color joystick module that we sell, the way that you enter into the joystick settings is you press and you hold down the profile button for more than 1 second, and it'll go into the settings menu, and you'll get a menu that looks like here at the bottom, where it has such things as setting the time. You can display the time in either a 12-hour or 24-hour format. You can change the distance. This is your trip odometer. that you can change. You can change the amount of backlight, how bright the chair, the LCD is. You can change it from blue to white. So if you have a contrast issue, or if you're outdoors and you want it to be brighter, you've changed it to the white background and you can see it much better outside. On the CJSM2 joystick, it's a little different how we're going to get into this setting. You're going to do that by pressing and holding the top left button, okay, which is the soft key, again for more than 1 second, and then you get into the settings menu. Now the settings menu for the CJSM2 as well as the Omni 2 have additional settings in there that the user can adjust. Those include the time, just like before, either the time and the format. The distance, again, you can read the odometer and you can reset the trip odometer. The backlight, this has a couple of additional features, including if you want the auto brightness or a timeout of the brightness to be set. Then you have the ability to set up your Bluetooth. And again, you can have 2 Androids and 2 PCs devices, and you can also set up your IR, which is your infrared device. And then you also have a programming section. So before I go and show you all of that, what I want to do is have a little camera here on my on a chair that is sitting here in front of me, and I want to just show you how to get into that setting. So if I come down here and escape out of here, okay, so I'm in the standard drive profile. If I press and hold down this upper left key, you go into the settings. And you can see what you do is you use the joystick to navigate through the menu. Okay, as I go up and down. If I go into time and I move the joystick to the right, it goes into set time, and then I can go in here and I can set my time. And so I have the ability to set the date, okay, the day, and the time, and then if I get to the exit, all I do is hit the arrow forward or the joystick forward, and it takes me out. You also have the ability to set it to 12 or 24 hours, and again, there's always an exit to get back out. If I go into distance, you can see that the total distance here, this one has gone 2 miles. The trip distance is set at 0.3. The display distance is currently set to be total. If I want it to only be trip, I can go left and right to do that. If I want to clear the trip distance, I go to this one and I go over, and it's going to clear it. As you can see now, it's set to 0 up here. Okay, and again, I have an exit. The backlight, again, I can set the backlight up or down, and I can set that. I've got this set really low so that I don't get any glare on it, but that's how it's set up. The Bluetooth and the IR setup we're not going to go through in this session. We may do a separate session for that. But there is this programming session as well that I want to talk about, and I want to go into this because there is a set of parameters that you can set from the menu from that. So let's go in here back to my presentation, and we'll show you what those settings are. So on the Omni 2, just so you know, on the Omni 2, in order to get into settings, you use this upper right key in order to get into the settings, not the upper left. So it is the opposite side in order to do that. Okay, and the menu is accessed again by holding that soft key for more than 1 second. Again, the same options are available on the Omni 2 as you have for the CJSM2, including all of the time and format and the Bluetooth and IR and such. All right, I think what's interesting here is that we do have a programming setting within the settings section of the menus that we've got, and these again are accessible by the end user. All they have to do is press and hold that key, and then they can get into this themselves. So there is a controls, and what this does is it allows you to set a sleep timer for any of the available profiles that are set up for that joystick. This may be of use, most of the time it's not, but if somebody wants to be able to have their chair automatically go to sleep in a particular profile, they can set that up. You have 2 settings for the sound. One is for the sounder volume. So every time I press a button or move a joystick within a mode, you get that clicking or that beeping noise that happens. If you want to turn that off or turn it down so it's not so loud, you have the capability to do that directly through the settings menu. You also have the ability to adjust the sound of the horn. The horn on the CJSM2 is very loud, and sometimes people may want to reduce the noise of that, the sound of that, so it's not so alarming. You also have the ability to the startup beep. Every time you power the chair on and off, it makes a beeping sound to let you know that it's powered up. Some people may find that annoying and they may want to turn that off, and so they can do that as well. There's also this momentary screen setting that you have. Every time you change a profile, it'll come up with a short little momentary screen to let you know that it has been changed. If that is annoying as well, you can turn that off so that there is no momentary screen that comes up. Okay, and then you have the ability, depending on the preference of the individual, whether or not you want the speed display to be in miles per hour, kilometers per hour, or simply just turn it off. Sometimes people may want to just a dealer may just want to turn it off because it's distracting for the end user or whatever, and they may just want to simply turn it off. But they have that capability to do that through the settings menu. And then you also have the ability to say on the displays to set the format of the digital drive. Do you want it to be actually displayed? Do you want the odometer displayed? All of those things you can set in there as well. Okay, so again, I'm going to switch back to my camera, and I have to turn my camera back on. And if you're interested, this little device I've got, this little program I've got, is called A Power Mirror. It basically allows me to plug in my phone, because I'm watching this through my phone, into my PC, and I can actually display this on here. I find that slow motion actually darkens it up so you don't get that glare that you typically get when you're looking or trying to record the screen. In any case, in here you see that there is this controls section, and again, under here, this is where you have your profile controls where you can set your sleep. That one's currently set to 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and just turn that one all the way off. Okay, I don't want it to go to sleep. There's your sounder volume, which you can change the sound of the beeps. The horn one, whether or not I want it to beep when it starts up. My momentary screens, if I wanted to have that momentary screen whenever it changes profiles. Again, do I want in miles per hour, or do I want it in kilometers? Okay, or if I don't want, or if I want it off. Okay, and then again, my display for the speed. Do I want the speed displayed? Do I want the odometer displayed? Do I want them both displayed? Yes. Okay. And then we have a system setting as well, and under here we have a diagnostic. So before I show you that, let's go back to the presentation so that you can see that under programming there is a systems. Okay, and again, this is by the user. They can get access to the errors that the system has been recording. And so under this diagnostics, it allows the end user to read that information. So you don't even need to have this connectivity in order to actually view that. The end user can go through there and they can actually read the faults, and they can find out what the chair may be occurring during its time that it's been running. So again, let's go back. Okay, put this back onto slow motion so you can see it. And if I go into diagnostics, okay, it gives me all of the modules. So there's a joystick module, a power module. This one has the intelligent seating module, a tilt module, and the unknown module, which is actually the control 5. But if I say I go into joystick module, okay, and I right click, here are all of the things that it has occurred that it would consider to be an error. Now, some of these aren't errors at all, like charging. That's not an error. It's just a function that it's been doing. But it has caused the chair not to drive, and so it comes up with a fault. There is a gone to sleep. Again, there's some more chargings, some more gone to sleep. So it continues to keep a log of all of these various times that it has detected an error. So if I go back here one more time, let's go to power module. You can see there's a brake error, a memory error. Those are things that would have occurred on that as well. Okay, maybe a tilt module. There's nothing in the tilt module. Maybe there's just a bad cable error on the ISM, so forth and so on. There's also one called timers, and timers gives you an idea as to how much time the actual chair has actually driven. This chair has driven 1 hour and 3 minutes. Okay, so that's not how much time it's been on, but how much time it's actually been driving. Okay, so now we're going to move to onboard programming. So the first one we talked about was just the settings. Now we're going to talk about onboard programming. So how do we get into onboard programming? Well, I'll tell you that it's different than other manufacturers. Even though we all use RNet, or many manufacturers will use RNet, there is a program setting deep inside the electronics that allows the onboard programming to be accessed via different methods. One method is to plug the dongle in. So the PC dongle that we use in order to use the PC programming, if you plug that into the system, you power it up, it enables onboard programming so that you can get into and make changes. For Sunrise, what we do is we say, you know what, we want people to be able to access onboard programming even if they do not have a dongle. So by doing so, what we say is that all Sunrise power chairs that are fitted with RNet and a display device. So it does not work with an LED, but if you've got a display, whether it's a CJSM1, a CJSM2, or an Omni, we will provide access to onboard programming through a key sequence. You do not need a dongle, but you can still get to it with a dongle as well. If you plug a dongle and you forget the sequence, all you do is plug the dongle in. You will have access to onboard programming as well. So what is the sequence? In order to enter into the onboard programming, it does require you to do the power-up sequence in a particular order of button holds in order to get you into that setting. And that really reduces or almost completely eliminates the fact of somebody accidentally getting into onboard programming. And the sequence is first of all, you start with the power turned off. You hold down the horn button. You can see the horn button here in the center. And while holding the horn button, you hold the power button on. Okay, and you will wait and you'll hear a beep that'll occur. Once you hear that beep, you release the horn, but again, continuing to hold the power button. Then you wait for a beep, okay, and then finally you release the horn, the power button. I always like to think horn, power, horn, power. I'm going to start with the horn, then I'm going to hold the power. Then I'm going to release the horn, then I'm going to release the power. So horn, power, horn, power. So I'm going to switch back and I'm going to show you how to get into this again. Again, my camera keeps going to sleep, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the power off. Okay, I'm going to hold the horn button and hold the on-off button. You hear a small beep, then you let go of the horn button. You hear another small beep, and you let go of the on-off, and now you've been entered into the onboard programming. So again, I'm going to do that quickly so that you can see that again. Horn, on-off, horn, on-off. And that's as simple as it is to get in there, but it's also that difficult so that it's not going to be something that somebody's going to accidentally get into. If you are on a CJSM1 joystick, obviously the horn and the power button are right up here at the top. But again, it's the same sequence. Hold the horn and then the power. You release the horn and then release the power, and it takes you into the onboard programming menu. Now, I think it's important to understand the programming categories that are available within the onboard programming menus. So if we think about these in two different categories, there is what I call the global and then the profiled. Under global, I'm going to use the word umbrella because it kind of gives me a visual of the umbrella basically covering all the other parameters and all the other profiles on the chair. So a global parameter is maybe an overarching or an umbrella that covers all the different profiles. And then under profile, I like to use the word bucket because a bucket, it can be more isolated. It's just those items that are available within that profile. So I use the word bucket. And I'm going to show you what exactly are available under the umbrella, under the global, and under the bucket, or for each of the individual profiles. We also have parameters that are specifically designed that talk about modes. Now, what's a mode? A mode is any function, actually 8 total, that can be activated by the joystick. So what are those modes? There are 8 of them available. The first one is drive. Obviously, the chair is a mobility device. We need to drive the chair, and we're going to drive the chair with the joystick or with that input device. So drive is going to be mode number 1. But also we can use it to activate the seating. And so we can adjust our power seating through drive, through the joystick, or through the input device. And so seating becomes a mode as well. And so it is mode number 2. Now also through the joystick or through the input device, we have multiple Bluetooth functionalities. And so we have already pre-identified a plug-and-play type of situation. So if you plug in a Bluetooth module or a joystick or an Omni that has Bluetooth capabilities, we're going to assign it a mode so it'll be available again as plug and play. The first one is the mouse 1. This is the module. This is the way we used to operate exclusively, the way we had the capability to operate Bluetooth functionality before we had the CJSM2 and before we had the new Omni 2. We only used a single module. That module would sit under the seat or under the backrest, and it would only control one Android or PC device, and it was a mouse mover. We still sell those. We still offer that, so that you can order a basic joystick and still get Bluetooth functionality. You have that, but it's designed to just work as a single point of contact, a single module. But within the CJSM2, we have the ability to offer 4 Bluetooth connectivities, 2 for Android and 2 for iOS. So under mode 4, okay, we can control those mouse movements through those Bluetooth device built into the CJSM2. Also, we have an additional 4 that are available in the Omni 2, and so it has its own mode as well. So in each of those modes, you have 4 selections for 4 different devices. You can actually have 8 Bluetooth connectivities if you had both of those on the same system. So because they are different, they have 2 separate modes, and so those are modes 4 and modes 5. Mode number 6 is for IR control. That gives you the capability through the joystick to control infrared devices such as TVs, home entertainment centers, those type of things that use infrared control. So mode 6 is going to be infrared. Mode 7 is like mode 3, that it is a module that sits on the chair. It only does one connectivity, but this one does an iDevice, such as an iPhone or an iPad. And then, just like I've talked about already, mode 8 is programming. That means I can actually use my joystick to control and to set parameters within the system. So it is a mode, and it's mode number 8. If you ever have a situation where somebody needs to turn off onboard programming, you go into the mode enable menu, and you can actually turn off mode 8. And when you do that, onboard programming is no longer available. In those cases, you would need to go use the PC programmer exclusively in order to go ahead and turn things on and off. We also have parameters that are designated for seating. And again, those are not under the umbrella or the bucket because they're kind of their own system. And then we have a system setting as well. So let's talk about the global parameters. What are available within the global parameters? Again, a global parameter, okay, that basically is that umbrella, and it affects all the profiles are affected in these global parameters. So what are those? Well, we have enhanced steer. That gives you the ability to adjust the steering to keep the chairs from veering. You have the actuator entry axis. We're going to talk about these individually. We have the ability to change the profile in drive. So you have the ability to change whether or not you want to be able to change the profile while you're driving, or if you have to come to a stop. You have the ability to adjust the speed, okay? If you want that turned on or off, that's a global parameter. Okay, and whether or not you want to be able to adjust the speed while you're driving, and those are all yes or no type of questions. The reverse alarm, this is that alarm when you're backing up that makes that a noise like a trash truck, whatever, as you're backing up. Okay, and it has the ability to do the lock function, which gives you the ability to lock the chair out so that it requires a key sequence to be able to drive the chair again. And then we have the power up mode. Again, this every time you power the chair up, which mode do you want it to start in? Typically, we're always going to start in the last mode that was turned off, just in case somebody accidentally turns it off. They turn it back on, it goes back to the same mode that they were in. And then we have the max speed setting, and this really just is what is going to be displayed on the actual on the joystick. Okay. Now let's look at some of these advanced controls or the global controls that are allowed, these overarching controls. So you can see that under controls, which is a menu item, there's something called advanced controls. Under advanced controls, you have things like enhanced steer correct. Now enhanced steer correct, what it does is that if the joystick is placed directly forward or left or right or whatever, the wheelchair or the electronics sends a signal to the motors to drive the chair. Now, depending on how well the chair is set up, how well the motors are tuned, or any anomaly that may happen within the chair may not actually drive directly straight, even though I'm giving it a complete direct straight command. So we may need to be able to adjust the veer of the chair if it's starting to veer to the left or the right, and we want to correct that. We call that enhanced steer correct. Now, if you go from 0 and you go to a negative number, that means you're going to provide more correction to the left. If you're going to give it a positive number, then you're going to give it more correction to the right. And allows you just to fine tune that. It's really only used primarily for somebody using a latched functionality where they want to latch the chair to drive in a straight line, and the chair doesn't want to drive completely straight. It starts to veer left or right. So we actually have the ability to adjust that under enhanced steer correct. The next one is in stop beep. We don't use that functionality within our actuators. We don't use that functionality, but we do use the next one down, which is the actuator entry axis. Now what that means is that every time I go into mode number 2, which is my seating, which axes do I want to be in? Do I want to always, when I go into tilt? Do I always want to go into recline? Do I always want to start in that particular axis? Now you can always change it, but which one do I want to enter into? Most of the time we set it to last, so that if you were in tilt and you got out of that mode and you wanted to drive, you go back into tilt, go back into seating, you go right back to tilt. But if you always want to make sure that every time that somebody goes from a drive situation into seating, you always want to make sure they go to a particular one, maybe it's recline or recline with the legs or whatever, because that's the one they use the most. You can set it up so that it'll always enter into that axis every time, so it's that they don't have to toggle left and right to get to it. It just maybe saves somebody a step in that process. We also have the capability to change the profile while driving. So one of the things people want to do is as they're driving the chair, maybe it's going too fast or maybe it's going too slow, and they want to adjust the profile that they're in. You can do that while in drive. If you turn this and say no, that means you have to come to a complete stop, have the chair being at rest before you change the profile. Now this may be important if somebody accidentally is hitting the profile button while they're driving. They want the functionality to change the profile, but they don't want to actually hit it maybe when their hand's on the joystick and it's moving forward. Maybe their knuckle or some part of their hand is accidentally hitting the profile button. You can turn that off so that they have to come to a complete stop in order to change the profile. Okay, going on, we also have what we call speed adjust. Now speed adjust allows us to, do we want to actually turn the functionality of the speed, the paddles or the buttons? You want to actually turn those off. Now this may be important, again, if somebody's accidentally hitting those and you don't want to use speed adjust at all, you only want to use profile, or you want to minimize the functionality of this, you can turn that on or off in that sense. And you can set, again, if you want somebody to be able to change their speed while they're driving. So the first one says I'm going to not have it work at all. The second one says it'll work, but only when I'm sitting at neutral and not while I'm driving. And most of the time, those are going to be set to yes, because we want people to be able to adjust their speed and to adjust it while driving, but you can change that. The next one is the reverse driving alarm. Now this is that trash truck or whatever that's backing up and it's making the beeping noise as it goes into reverse. Some people may want that because they can't see behind them, so they want to alert people when anytime they back up. Most of the time that's turned off. It is kind of an annoying thing, but could be something that could be a safety thing that people want to have turned on. Now the lock function, typically not used in our chairs because people typically don't get out of their chairs, but the lock function allows it so that if somebody is going to leave their chair, they can lock the joystick so that somebody can't just jump in it and go. You may want this at a school or something. If a kid's going to be out of a chair and they don't want some other kid to come and play with the chair, you can set that so that you can either have a key, which we don't sell, but you can get from PG Drives, or you have a sequence. So when you power it up, you have to do a sequence of forward and reverse in order to get the chair to unlock. So that may be something people want. You can set that up to here as well. The power up mode is much like the entry access. Every time I power the chair up, which mode do I want to be in? When I power the chair up, do I want to always start in seating? Do I always want to start in drive? Do I always want to start in Bluetooth? Is there a particular mode that I always want to start up in? You can set that so it always starts up in drive so that people don't have to try to figure out if they're in drive mode. They can just start to drive right after they power up. So again, you can set that to any one of the various modes, or you can set it up to the last mode that they would have been in to do that. Okay. And the last one here is the max display speed. If you order a chair that's a 6 mile an hour motors, then you want the maximum display here to be 6 miles an hour. The electronics do not have a means to tell you how fast the chair is going. It says that if the chair is fully deflected and the output is at maximum, it's going to display whatever is set into this parameter. So if you set this to say 15, okay, then the chair is going to read going much faster than it's actually going to be able to go. This may be useful for somebody who's like they want to go full speed, but maybe they're not really the right candidate to go full speed. If you set this number a little higher, then it'll falsely read the speed on the joystick. Again, it's not going to change the speed of the chair. It's just going to just change what is displayed on the joystick. So that may be useful. Before we go on to these other ones, let's go ahead and take a quick look at these on the chair itself. If I can power it back up. Hang on just a second. I went to sleep. Okay. And we'll go back to here. We're going to power this up. Go power. Okay, so what we talked about is the controls and the advanced controls. So here are those settings that I talked about. Enhanced speed control. Again, you're going to use your speed up and speed down in order to make those changes. One thing about this, if I press and hold it, it'll go in sections of 20 or 10. So I don't have to go click, 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 click. I can just simply just hold it and it'll go and it'll jump, and it makes it easier to make gross changes to the settings. You have end stop. Again, I talked about it. We're not using that. Here's where I can say, do I want it to be, do I want to go into axis number 1, which is my tilt or recline or whatever? Or do I want it just to go into the last one I was at? Do I want to change profiles while driving? Yes. Okay, do I want to adjust the speed while driving? Yes. Do I want to adjust the speed in drive? Yes. Do I want to be able to put the reverse drive on? No, I don't want it to really beep. My lock function, and again, my last power up function takes me to the last function I was in when I power up. And here again is my display speed set at 6 miles an hour. Okay, so again, Those are all under the control setting under advanced controls. That's where you're going to find all of those. Okay, so let's go on and talk about the profile parameters. And I like to use the analogy of a bucket, so I put a picture here of a bucket so you can see it. So what are the profile parameters that are available? Now remember, there are 8 profiles or 8 buckets. We're going to talk about the 8 various ones that we've got a little bit later, but right now I want to talk about what you can set within each of these 8 buckets. So each of these buckets can be set up differently so that you can customize how the chair will drive for the end user in each of those parameters or each of those profiles. So the things that you can do is you can enable the modes, okay, so that you can set up which mode is going to work within each profile. So that may be helpful. Also the input devices, okay, what we're going to use within that input device. You also can set up the joystick itself. This is helpful because you may have a different input device for different with different joysticks on the chair, and it may be important to have those set up independently. You may need to have the throw set up independently, the orientation set up independently, the deadband and such. All of those can be set individually for each of the various profiles. You can set up the speed, okay, including the acceleration, the deceleration, and the actual speed, both in forward, reverse, and turn. And typically, this is what people assume the profile is for, is really just so they can set up the various speeds of the chair and how it drives. But there are all these other things as well. You can set up a latch, so you may want to have some profiles work with latch and some not. You can set up that for both the drive and for the seating independently. You can set the drive parameters, including the power, the torque, and the tremor, and we're going to talk about that for each of these profiles. That helps you because in an indoor mode, you may want the chair to have less power and torque, and outdoor you may have more of that available. And you have standby. So you can have standby set up in some profiles and not in others. Again, that may be very helpful as you're setting up a chair for somebody. And then you have the actual Omni ports. And when we get to the Omni section, you will see that you can set up the 2 different ports on the chair for different profiles. Now moving on to profile parameters, let's look at some of these. So there are 8 profiles that you can access. Again, a profile is the bucket that we have that we can use, and we can set all of the various parameters we want within each of those drive profiles. Okay, from the factory, we actually pre-program these for you. And we do that so that the chair becomes plug and play. All you have to do is you plug a device in, and based on its device identification, it'll automatically access a profile for you. So what we do is, because we know joystick is used most often, we give 5 profiles and we dedicate those 5 profiles for joystick driving. Now this works with either an LED joystick, a CJSM1, or a CJSM2. Typically an LED joystick is only going to use one profile, profile number 5, and then it uses a speed up and speed down because you don't have profile and speed on there. So we typically use the speed up, speed down for that. Okay. Now the joystick, number 1 is going to be the slowest setting. Number 5 is going to be the fastest settings. Okay. So, but we're going to give you 5 profiles, and you can change that. We'll show you how to change the number of profiles, but that's what we give you as a default setting. We automatically give you 2 profiles for the Omni or the Omni 2. These are profiles number 6 and profile number 7. Now, profile number 6 is indoor. We name it as indoor. Again, this is something we do at the factory. It can be changed. Number 7 is outdoor. So we automatically set those profiles up for you for the Omni settings. And then number 8, we make for attendant. So the attendant module, anytime the attendant module is plugged into any of our systems, it automatically identifies itself as an attendant control, and it uses profile 8 as the settings for that. Again, you could have multiple attendant control settings if you want, but there's really no need for it because the attendant typically just needs one set of profile settings. Again, they have this ability to change their speed within that, but that sets up that device automatically. Again, it makes it plug and play. It's always sitting there residing, waiting for a device to be plugged in. As soon as the device is plugged in, it recognizes its identification. It accesses the profile available for it. Now, again, these can all be changed, but this is the way it comes default from the chair. Okay, so those are profiles. Now, what are the modes? Now, modes, if you look under the onboard programming menu, there is a section called modes, and it gives you this kind of a spreadsheet looking thing with all the profiles down on the left and the modes across the right. Now, it doesn't give you the names of the modes. You can find out what those modes are in the PC programming, but it only gives you the numerical identification here on onboard programming. So by default, these are the 8 modes that we've set. And we've talked about this already. Number one, drive profile 1, or mode 1 is drive, mode 2 is seating, and then we have this big bulk of them that are for IR and Bluetooth, and then number 8 is set up for onboard programming. Okay, again, under the PC, you can see exactly what those names are. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how the modes operate within each of the various profiles, because I think this is important to understand. Now, under the onboard programming, again, we're going to go to modes. Under modes, you see this grid. Okay, across the left, you see the profiles listed 1 through 7. There's actually 8. There's one down here at the bottom you can't see. And across the top, it says modes 1 through 4. There's actually 5, 6, 7, and 8 across the right. Now, again, the profiles going down this way is the bucket. And these buckets are set up in profiles. The modes, which go across the right, are going to be, again, populated with this grid. The way that this works is that every time you basically do this across here, if under profile 1, you'll see that in this example, I have mode 3 says no. So I'm going to enable and disable the modes within each of these settings. Now, one of the things that the RNet system does is if you have multiple profiles set up for an input device. Now, remember I said the input devices can be either the joystick, the Omni, or the attendant control. And there are others, but those are the 3 that we use. Okay? Within those 3, because we default the first 5 profiles to all be joystick, that means that we do not have to have every profile within those 5 profiles, do not have to have every mode in them for that mode to work. The only exception is on mode 1, which is drive. Now, why do we do that? Well, we could go in here and we could set all of these settings to yes. And if we did that, it would mean that when we use the mode profile button or the mode profile toggle switch on the CJSM2, you would have to make additional hits to get around the horn, if you will, to access all of the modes and all the profiles. There would be duplicates set up in there that could be quite annoying. So again, these are your settings. The drive 1, or drive profile mode 1, is the one that's the most key. All these other ones do not need to be populated in these as long as the input device is set up and common amongst all of the profiles. Okay, so again, we only need, because in this example, profile 5 is the one we have populated. That's the only one we need to have populated to work with all of the modes within that input device. They're usually set to yes. Now I'm going to show you what this does if you accidentally, or if somebody goes in here and they make all of these yes. So we're going to set this up, okay? Now currently it's set with it, so it says no in all of these other modes within these profiles. So if I go to my mode profile, you can see it right here at the bottom on my screen. Okay, it says P and mode. That's profile and mode. When I press this down, okay, it goes to profile 3, profile 4, profile 5. The next hit takes me to seating. The next one takes me to my Bluetooth. The next one takes me back to my drive. Now, if I had additional items like IR or in here, it would toggle me through that one as well. And now again, I can go through my profile. So somebody who's using the mode profile button wants to easily access all of their profiles and all of their modes just by hitting the button several times. Now, if I change this and I go back into my onboard programming and I go into modes, okay, and I start to make all of these yes. Okay, so now you can see the grid is completely full with yes, or basically enable. Now I go back out of here. I turn the power off, turn it back on. Okay, and now when I hit the mode profile, it's going to go speed profile 2, speed profile 3, just like I want to do, speed profile 4, speed profile 5, and now it says tilt. Okay, I'm in my mode 2 because mode 2 is seating. Oops, I went to sleep again. Hang on. Okay, so it's in seating. Now I hit it again. It didn't go to my next mode because now it's going across the grid. It's basically when I have to hit each one of those. So I got to click, 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 and finally I get to my next mode. Now it's going to go through all the, internally it's going through all that little matrix of items. And finally I get back to my speed profile. Now that means I have to click this, when I get here, I got to click it a bunch of times just to get back to seating. That's because I've populated all of those, that little grid to yes. That's why we usually set that to no on those other ones, because that way you don't have to, when you're using this button, you don't have to toggle through all of those settings. It's not going to harm anything if you set it to yes, but it will become very annoying in order to manage all of those settings. So that's really what that setting is for. Now, one of the things we can do, though, is let's say I want to minimize the number of drive profiles that are set up in a particular device. I can go down here and under modes again, if I say, you know what, again, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to set all of these back to no. Okay, like I had it before. Okay, but now I only want to have two profiles. I want profile 1 and I want profile 5. I really don't want the rest of these profiles. I can turn off profile 2, turn off 3, and turn off 4. Now, oops, yeah. Now, so I've got profile 5 is yes. I got profile 1 says yes for mode 1. Now what I've done is I basically disabled these three versions right here for profile 2, profile 3, and profile 4 are now turned to no. Now when I go out of here, and I turn this back off, back on, get that out of the way. Now I have profile 1 and I have profile 5. I only have two profiles, and I've minimized the chair's complexity by only providing it with two profiles. Now maybe I only want profile 1, 2, and 3. I can do that even though I turn off 5, which has all of the modes populated. It doesn't matter, because as long as at least one of those profiles have the modes enabled, I still have access to the modes in order to do all of my other functions. Again, this is a capability to basically minimize the confusion that somebody may have with having all of the buttons and all of the profiles and stuff to mess with. You can simply just reduce the number of profiles by turning off mode number 1 in the various profiles that you're working with. All right, so let's move now and start to talk about setting up the joystick. So far, we've talked about some of the global settings, and we talked about enabling and disenabling the modes, so that maybe if you want to reduce the amount of complexity in the chair, you can do that. But how do we set the joystick up for an individual so that they can drive it effectively and efficiently? What's the best way of doing that? Well, I think that you can, to me, there's like logical steps that you need to make. Now, it's not necessarily in order in onboard programming, but it does make the most logic to me when you're setting up somebody for drive. Again, the first thing I think is the orientation. Now, the orientation has it important because where do you want that joystick set for that person? If on the chair, on the armrest, where their hands moving, in each direction is oriented in the way that comes from the factory, no big deal. But if you have to move that joystick or move the direction in which the joystick needs to be have the throw of the joystick in order to work, you need to set that orientation up, or the person's never going to be able to drive to even get started. So you got to get that orientation right. Now on our chairs, you have multiple mounting options. You can mount off the backrest, you can mount to a fixed or swing away joystick or a midline joystick. So there are multiple ways that you can set the joystick up and have that accessible to the end user. And so the orientation really matters. The second one is the throw. How far do I need to throw, or how far do I need to move the joystick to reach full speed? Throw means that if I only can move the joystick a portion of its entire mechanical throw, but I want to get full speed out of it, I can do that through the throw functionality. And that can really be important if somebody's using a specialty device, a micropilot, or maybe a touch drive, that type of thing, where they can't get their hand to move the full throw, but they still want to be able to access full speed of the chair. The next one is deadband. And we'll show you how to set the deadband. The deadband is how far do I need to move the joystick before it begins or starts to drive. This can be really handy for somebody who's maybe using a heavy-duty joystick or a joystick with a big handle on it, because if they're resting their hand on the joystick all the time, they may be holding it out of neutral in normal conditions, and you may want to enlarge that deadband so it doesn't have to be moving all the time. It's easier for them to find neutral on the chair. Okay, and then lastly, after we've set those things up, then we can go in and really set up how fast is that chair going to go, how quickly it's going to go, and how quickly will it come to a stop. Those are all the things you're going to do in the speed setting. Many times people start with speeds, but if you don't get the joystick oriented and the throw and the deadband right, you're only going to be fighting yourself trying to get those settings to work correctly. Okay. So under the controls menu, there is a joystick setting, and under the joystick, we're going to adjust the orientation. So we're actually going to start here with the orientation. Okay, like I said before, how do we set the orientation? If the joystick isn't straight in front of them with their hand on it, and they get full motion of their hand on the joystick, how can we adjust the orientation of the joystick? Well, this is where we're going to do that. The first one we have is active orientation. Anytime you see the word active in onboard programming, that's an indication that you are actively going to move the joystick, and it's going to get direct feedback from the joystick itself in order to set the parameter. Now, in this case, we have the ability, we can set this in each of the various profiles independently. Okay, and what we're going to do is, because we're going to set the forward and the left, because the opposite direction will be the opposite. So if we set this differently, then the joystick will operate in that functionality. So let's go to our joystick here, and we're going to set the active orientation. Okay. All right, so again, we're going to go into onboard programming. Okay, we're going to go into controls, joystick, and go to active orientation. Okay, we're going to start, we'll just start with profile 1. We're going to right click. Okay, so it's going to ask me to move the joystick in the desired forward position. So let me give you an example. Somebody who's driving their chair and they're driving a chin control. it may be very easy for them to pull the joystick back because that's a natural movement for them. To extend their neck or to extend their chin forward in order to drive forward may be very tiresome, and it may change their field of view, and so they really don't want to have to move the joystick forward to drive forward. They want to be able to pull the joystick back in order to drive forward. Well, in this case, I would take the joystick and I would pull it back. And once I pull it back, I need to take my other hand and set it by pressing the speed up. Okay. Now it says I want to set the desired position for left. I still want left to be left. I only wanted to change forward and reverse. So in this case, I move the joystick left, and again, I hit the button, and now it's going to change the orientation of the joystick. So now when I'm going to pull the joystick back, the chair will go forward. I move the joystick forward, the chair will go in reverse. So this is an example of active orientation. The second one we have, okay, is orientation detail. Now this is going to be something you can set up manually in the chair so that you do not need to actually move the joystick to do that. Okay, and in this case, we'll move again back to our joystick. Okay, under, oops, why is this thing going to sleep? Okay, all right, so we're going to move the to orientation detail, and here you can see I have set the inverse forward and reverse set up as yes. So I've inverted the forward and reverse. I also have the ability to invert the left and right, or I can swap. Okay, so again, we're going to go back here. For right now, we're going to set this all to no. Okay, because we don't want that set to be inverted. Okay. All right, but under swap, okay, what is swap? Well, swap allows me the ability, go back here, obviously to invert to forward and reverse, is obviously forward becomes reverse, reverse becomes forward. But what does swap do? Well, swap actually says what I want to do is I want my forward and reverse to become left and right, and I want my left and right to become forward and reverse. You can do the same thing in the active orientation, but this one you actually have to set this in 3 different settings. And so this is typically how you're going to do this. You're going to change the axis. So instead of just making forward, reverse, and reverse forward, now I have the ability to make left and right actually be forward and reverse, and forward and reverse to be left and right. Again, if you take the joystick itself and you physically just move it 90 degrees, maybe you're doing a midline mount, and you want that joystick at 90 degrees because you don't want it to interfere with the person as they're moving around, then you would need to swap this so that left and right now became forward and reverse. Okay, so that's joystick orientation. Okay, the next one is the joystick throw. Now the joystick throw has to do again with how far do I need to move the joystick in order to reach full speed. Okay. So on active throw, I'm going to set this actively using the joystick in the on the chair. I'm trying to get my camera to work here. Okay, so if I go back, if I go under active throw, okay, again I can set this for my profile. It says it wants me to move the joystick into the desired forward position, and then I'm gonna hit the speed to capture it. So let's say I'm moving my joystick and I can't, if I go full forward, it goes to 100%, but maybe I can't. Maybe I have really good strength pulling back and have really good strength to the left, but this right and forward, it's really difficult. So it says to move the joystick in the forward direction, okay, and maybe I can only get to right about there. So you have the person move it to a natural position, and then you use the speed button or the speed toggle in order to capture that setting. Now it says move it to the left position. I got good control of the left. I can go full speed on the left. Okay, my reverse, I got good control in reverse. Okay, I got 100%. But my right, again, my forward and my right motion is I have limited motion on that. So I can only get to maybe 40, 48% or something. and then I hit the button and it allows me to set that setting. And you only have between 25 and 100%. So you have to have a minimum of 25% of movement of the joystick for it to actually activate. Okay. Now when I go to drive the chair, I don't have to move the joystick fully forward to get full speed. It's going to make the joystick a little more sensitive because it's only going to have a small amount of throw, and then it'll actually reach full speed. Okay. The next thing you have is throw detail. Okay, if I go into throw detail, you can actually see here's where I have set those parameters using the active throw. But now you can see it in its parameters itself. Again, the throw detail, just like the orientation detail, is a way for you to actually use the speed up, speed down to make that change. I apologize. Okay. And I've also changed my right. Again, if you remember, I changed the right because it needed to have that as well. So we're going to set these back to 100% so that this chair will drive the way I expect it. Okay, but that's how you've changed those settings. Now, let's go back and now we'll talk about the deadband itself. So deadband is the ability for me to set how far the joystick needs to move before the chair actually begins to respond. So that can be entered in. It is not something that is set as an active. It's only set in through the detailed functionality. Now again, why do I want this? If somebody's resting their hand on the joystick and they're holding the joystick out of neutral all day long because they can't take their hand on and off to get back to neutral, you may want to expand that. You can actually expand that from 10%, which is the minimum, up to 50%. Now, to use the throw and the detail together is going to be kind of tricky because if I set this deadband at 50% and I set the throw at 50%, you've essentially made this into a switch driving chair. There's only going to be one location, is when you hit that point, it's going to go full speed. So there'll be no proportionality left in the actual chair. So typically you don't use these both together. You might need to if somebody has really hand functionality that needs some fine tuning, but you can do that as well. And again, you're going to set that on the chair. If I go back to the joystick, you have the ability here to set the deadband, okay, all right, up to 50%. And now if I set this at a really high number, okay, all right, and then I go and I try to drive the chair. Okay, it's going to require that I move the joystick quite a bit out of neutral before it actually begins to recognize that. And so if I'm holding the joystick here in the middle, it's not going to actually have that problem that you would normally have with, Yeah, you can see it's real sensitive there, but on the other one, it was quite high. So that's how you go through and you set the joystick throw and the joystick deadband in those situations. Okay, now that we have the joystick set up, now we can start looking at the actual speeds of the chair, the accelerations and the decelerations. So under the onboard programming, there is a speeds setting. So under the speed settings, we're going to go and we're going to talk about forward, reverse, and turn speeds respectively. In each of these, there is an acceleration, a deceleration, and a speed. And what you'll see there is an acceleration maximum, an acceleration minimum, a deceleration maximum, deceleration minimum, and then a speed maximum and minimum as well. Now, it is important to understand that you can set this up in each of the profiles independently. And the maximum setting is that setting in which the speed toggle or the button is set to its maximum setting. So the speed maximum is set for the maximum, or the little tortoise or the hare rabbit version. Okay. The minimum is set when the speed is turned all the way down. So really what you're doing between those two is you're setting the spread, or the difference between what the acceleration, the deceleration, and the speed. What the difference is when the speed pot is turned, or the speed toggles are turned all the way up versus turned all the way down. And so it gives you kind of that variance between those two settings. Okay, so let's look at that quickly on the chair itself. So we're going to switch over to the chair that I've got set up here. And again, we're going to turn it off, go into the onboard programming. And my camera turned off. There we go. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into speeds. You'll see there's a forward, okay, and then there says acceleration up and acceleration down. One thing I didn't show, if the description here is abbreviated, if you come over to it and you hit a left click, it actually will give you the description. This one actually says forward acceleration maximum. It's a little difficult to see on this screen, but that's what it actually displays there, so it gives you that indication as what it is. And again, I can go in here and I can set, like for a profile 5, I can set the acceleration up and down on each of these for the maximum and the minimum. Now, one of the things, we don't allow people to set it too fast that it actually can drive unsafe. So you can have a what we call a fence, where if I try to set this up to its maximum, the maximum acceleration is set to 75. You can't get to 100% acceleration. You can only get to a maximum of 75. Okay, but it's important to know that you set the maximum and the minimum set up amongst all of these across the board in all of the profiles. Now, once you've got all of the speeds set, you've got the orientation of the joystick, you've got all the other functions set, then you need to find out whether or not somebody wants to use latch. Now, latch, if you will, is kind of like cruise control in your car. You want to be able to set the speed while driving and have it continue to drive at that speed even if your hand is off of the joystick. Now, there are obviously some safety things that we need to be concerned with there, because we don't want the chair driving off in a direction that is unsafe. So you do have the capability within each of the profiles to set if you want latch to be turned on. Now, it should be noted that in order to get the latch to work, there must be a device plugged into the bottom of the joystick. So this is the bottom look of the joystick. There are 2 jacks in the bottom of the joystick. You will need to have something plugged into the external jack here, and that switch needs to actually be closed. So you have to hold the switch closed in order to use the latch function. If you do not have something plugged into there, it will not allow you to drive the chair. It'll say you need to have that on there. If you want to change that so you do not need to have this safety switch plugged into there, it will require you to go into the PC programmer, and under the control section of the PC programmer, change the emergency stop switch to no. You do not have an onboard programming functionality to turn that off. You will need to use a PC programmer to actually turn that off. But in any case, if you have a switch, you can put a switch in there, you can hold it closed, and then you can use the latch function. It acts as kind of, if you will, of a dead man. If somebody has their arm on an armrest, they could have it so that their arm is actually closing the switch and they're driving the chair. They can let go of the chair can continue to, or let go of the joystick, the chair can continue to drive, but if their arm falls off of the armrest, it'll open the switch, and in doing so, it actually will stop the chair from driving. So it is a safety feature that is built into the electronics. Now, a couple of things is that you will need to have, if you want to set the drive to latch, you have actually some options. It can be turned off. It can be set to step reverse, cruise, and cruise reverse. The step actually allows you to to actually see this kind of a ladder or stair steps that'll actually appear on the joystick. Every time you touch the joystick and you move it forward, the speed will go to the next level, and you actually have 5 levels here that you can climb. And if you want to slow down a little bit, you just pull the joystick back momentarily and it'll step down to the lower one until it finally gets to off. If you hold the joystick in reverse, it'll stop the chair driving completely. So this is as a step one, you just hit the joystick, let it go, hit it again, let it go, and you can bump the speed all the way up. In order to do cruise speed, you actually hold the joystick until you reach the desired speed. Then you let go of the joystick and the chair will continue to drive in that direction at that speed. So that's how the cruise works different. And again, you can set the step up so that the step works in both forward and reverse, or the cruise can work both forward and reverse as well. Or you can have it just be in the forward orientation. Okay, you can also set the actuator. So if you want the actuator to go in a latched condition, you can do that as well. Now, in this situation, under actuators, it sets all of the actuators to latch. If you want just an individual actuator to latch, you can use the assignable button feature, and you can set that individually to each of the assignable buttons that you're using. But in this case, this is a global setting that if you set this actuator to latch, it'll latch all the actuators in the direction that you give it. Okay, there is a time setting, and the time setting is that it requires that an input needs to be given to the joystick in order for it to continue to be in latch. In this case, it's set to 5 seconds. So if I latch the chair and I'm going in a forward direction, after 5 seconds, it'll give me a beep. If the beep is turned on, a warning to let me know, hey, I'm going to turn the latch off if you do not give me another command. So this is another safety feature that's built in to say that it can only be in latch for a particular amount of time. If you want to continue to drive in latch, all you do is you give the joystick another command. This tells the chair that the person is still actively engaged with the joystick and that they can continue to control it. So that's really why you have this timing, and the beep is just a warning to let you know that the chair is getting ready to go to turn the latch back off. Okay, so then there are some drive parameters that are also available. The drive parameters themselves give you a power, a torque, and a trimmer adjustment parameters. Now the power, this is going to adjust the amount of power you have when you encounter an obstacle. So let's say maybe you're indoors, and while you're indoors, you do not want to mar up your walls or your furniture or something of that nature. Or maybe it's with children in a playground or whatever, and they don't want to have another child running the kid over, or a teacher or whatever. If you turn that power down, when that chair encounters an obstacle, it's going to only have a minimum amount of power to basically continue to push. Now the torque is similar in the fact that the torque allows you to also adjust how much torque the chair has to overcome obstacles, because some of these can be worked in conjunction. However, the torque is really for that low end kind of crawl over an obstacle in that situation. You do have also a trimmer damping that can be adjusted, and this allows the joystick to basically to be desensitized. So if somebody has trimmer in their hand and they're trying to drive the chair, it may cause the chair to kind of jumpy. And so you can turn that down, or if you turn the trimmer up, you desensitize the joystick. If you set it back to 0, then it becomes much more responsive as it would be normally. You also have a function in the systems setting to actually copy and paste a profile. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, let's say you are reducing the number of profiles that you want, and yet you want to have just 2 profiles, maybe 1 and 2, but you want profile number 2 to mimic profile number 5, or maybe to mimic profile number 3. And you want to be able to basically reduce it and still have the numbering system 1, 2, 3, but take profile 5 and just basically copy it right over the profile for number 3. Well, the way that you would do that is you would go into Systems, okay? Then you go into where it says Copy Profile, all right? And you're going to go, and then once you go into that, you'll say, okay, what is my source profile? What's the profile I want to copy? You say on this one, you would say Profile 5, okay? And then you would say, okay, I want to load that profile or copy that or paste that profile onto profile number 3. And now it's going to duplicate all of the settings for number 5 onto number 3. Okay. We have under the onboard programming is standby. Now, what is standby? Standby is the ability for us to access the various modes of the chair without using a mode or a mode profile button. What we're going to do is we're going to use time in order to enter into those particular modes. So how does this work? Well, under our controls setting, there is a standby setting. Under standby, you have 4 settings. The first one is switch to standby. The second is standby time. You have mode select and remote select. What this is going to give us is it gives us the ability to go in and use timeout in order for us to access this. And we're going to use a timeout and then a joystick movement in order to access the modes and the profiles of the chair. So first of all, switch to standby. It really isn't what we want to use here. Now you can do this. Instead of using a timeout, you can have a switch. But to me, if you have a switch, you don't really need standby because it's kind of redundant. If you can have a switch, just set that switch up to an assignable button and have that be your mode profile button. We don't really need that in this case. What we're going to use instead is the standby time. This is the amount of time that is required for us to set up or for the chair to basically wait with no input from the joystick to go into a standby setting. Okay? We have a mode select, okay, in standby. This gives us the ability to select if the standby select modes to use to power it down. Now, if we set this to no, that means when it goes to standby, it's essentially just going to go to sleep. We actually want to change that to yes, because what we want to do is we want to go to modes. We don't want to go to sleep, we want to go to modes. And so we want to turn that to yes. Okay, when that is set to yes, and we only set that to yes, we don't select remote select yet. Anytime the chair goes into standby, the joystick movement directly after it goes into standby, while it's waiting for the input, if you move the joystick forward, it'll go into drive. If you move the joystick to the left, it'll go into seating. So this allows somebody to be able to get into seating without having to use another switch. So if they can't get their hand off of the joystick to access another switch, they can use the standby functionality to do that. All they have to do is wait until the time allotted to go into standby. They move the joystick to the left, and now they can go forward and back and left and right in order to use the seating. Again, they come back to neutral. They wait. It goes back into standby. Now they can go back and go forward to drive, or again enter into seating once more time. Now the last one is a remote select. Now what this does is when we set this to yes, it allows us the ability to use the right command as a mode profile switch. This allows us to get to all the modes and all the profiles on here directly through using the right command of the joystick. All right, so let's do a demonstration so you can see how this is going to work. I'll bring my camera back over, and we're going to go into onboard programming. We're going to go down to controls, down to standby. Now, one of the things I didn't note is that if you're going to change and you want to use the full functionality of this, if you're going to change the standby time and the mode select and the remote select so you get the full functionality, it will be important that you make all of the various profiles for that input device to be active, okay, are basically the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, and in this case I'm going to set it for just 3 seconds. And because I'm using all 5 profiles for my joystick, I'm going to set all of these for yes across the board. If I don't, and I go into a various mode, it may not go back into standby to let me get back out. Okay, so now I have all of my 5 profiles set for a standby time of 3 seconds, of the mode select to yes, and my remote select to yes across the board. Okay, because I only need these first 5. I'm going to go all the way back out until I get back to my joystick. Now, what you saw there is after that 3 seconds, it went to a timed out, and it says stand by. It is waiting for me to make a command to the joystick. If I make the joystick command and I go forward, I automatically go to drive, and now I can drive the chair. If I wait the 3 seconds, it goes back to standby. I move the joystick to the left, I go into my seating. And now I can adjust my seating, and I can go to the various axes that I have available on this chair. If I wait again the 3 seconds, it goes back to standby. Again, a forward command takes me back to drive. If I wait the 3 seconds again, now I'm in standby. I go to the right, and now you'll see it says Profile 1, Profile 2, Profile 3, 4, and 5. Now if I hit it again, it goes to seating, it goes to Bluetooth, and it goes, because I have programming turned on, it does that as well. So this gives me the capability, without having to hit any buttons, I can just wait for the timeout, and then be able to move the joystick right or left in order to get into the various modes. It can be very handy for somebody who has limited hand function and cannot manage to get to the buttons. They can use standby in the case of that situation. All right, there is a setting in the onboard programming called ISM actuators. Now the ISM actuators gives you the capability to set the speed of the various actuators that come out of the seating module. Okay, you have an away speed and a home speed that can be set. All right, the home speed is going back to a 90 position. An away speed is when you're moving the joystick or moving the seating away from its home position. Okay. Now, you're only going to really look at 2 of these actuators that you might want to change, and that may be actuator number 2 and actuator number 3. And that is in the case of when you're using a power center mount or a power ELRs, because those 2 run together when you're elevating the leg rest. You may need to adjust those so that they run in sequence and not kind of one slower than the other. So you have the capability here to change the home speed and the away speed for number 2, for channel number 2, which is your power center mount extend, or if you're using ELRs, power ELRs, this is your left ELR, or you can use it for your right ELR or your lift actuator for number 3. And really, that's really the primary reason that you would want to change that. Otherwise, you would want to leave all of these at 100%. One of the things that you can do on this onboard programming is joystick calibration. Now, when you order a chair and you order a joystick on a chair, the entire remote has already been calibrated correctly. If somebody changes the joystick within the actual remote, they might need to reprogram it, but it's really more important for specialty controls in order to dial in a specialty control, because it may be either an aftermarket or maybe just a little more sensitive and needs to be recalibrated. The way you do this actually goes into the systems functionality. Under joystick calibration, it's going to be an active feedback. So you're going to actually move the joystick in its 4 directions. You follow the instructions on the screen. When you get it all done, you get a nice green X or a check mark that says that that's correct. Let's go ahead and look at what that's going to look like because we're here. Go back into my there. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go to Systems. Going to go to Joystick Calibration, and it's going to give us the, it says move the joystick forward. So I'm going to move the joystick forward until I get 2 X's on here. Both of these I have to have a check mark on them. All right, so I'm going to move it until I get 2 check marks. And then it says to move the joystick to the left. I'm going to move it to the left until I get 2 check marks. You just kind of move it around. All right, now it says to move it to the back. And again, I'm going to keep moving it until I get all of it. And then I get one more to the right. And I get it to the right. And I get all the check marks. Boom. And then I get one big check mark letting know that it has been calibrated. And that's really all that is required to do that. Okay. One of the things that there's on this is the profiles itself. Okay, so in the profile setting, it does give you a functionality to actually enable and disable profiles. Again, I talked about in the mode section, you can disable the mode number 1 in that mode, and then when you do that, that drive profile no longer works. Well, you also have the functionality here to actually turn that profile all the way off. This is especially important if you have had a chair that originally was ordered with an LED joystick, or maybe you're trying to add an LED joystick to it. You want to make sure that these settings for an LED joystick 1 through 4 are going to be turned off. You're only going to have one profile set up for an LED joystick. That's because it does not have a profile functionality. It is set up for only one profile with 5 speeds. And so in those cases, you are going to have profile 1 through 4 will be turned off and only 5 will be used. Okay, and we're going to usually try to keep profile 5 on that. And then I did talk early on about input devices. Okay, and in the input device section, you have the capability to set up which input device is going to be attached to which profile. And you can see in the example up here, profile 5 is set to joystick, profile 6 is set to Omni, profile 7 is set to Omni, profile 8 is set to attendant control. Now, this sets what kind of input device is used for each profile. Now, as default, we talked about 1 through 5 is joystick, 6 and 7 is Omni, 8 is attendant. Okay. Now, you do have the capability to actually change that, and let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So if you want to, and the reason that you would want to change this is if you had a situation where you needed, maybe you were using an Omni and you wanted more than one profile. Because again, we've only have 2 profiles that default to the Omni. Maybe you want to have additional ones on there. The way that you would do is you go to Input Devices, and again, you can see here it says JS for 1 through 5. And 6 and 7 are Omni, and 8 is attendant. Well, let's say I wanted to have 1 through 5 all be Omni. Okay, I can use a speed up and speed down. There is a universal. I don't recommend using universal because it does give you all of the profiles for any of the various input devices, and it can get kind of confusing. So let's say we want number 1 to be Omni, 2 to be Omni. Oops. All of these to be Omni. We still want to have a joystick one because we want it to be plug and play, but 1 through 4 will be set for the Omni, as well as 6 and 7. And it really gives us the flexibility to set how many profiles will be used for each of the various ones. You can also have attendant control as well. But I'm going to set these back so that it works correctly. All right, so that's how you set up using the input devices. All right, and really that is the end of the onboard programming menu. I want to thank you for your time today. Goodbye. Okay, so at this point we're going to carry on, and we're going to start now with talking about the Omni onboard programming. So we've been talking about the joystick. Now we're going to switch over and we're going to talk about the Omni itself and what options are available on the Omni itself. So in order to get into the Omni onboard programming, it is similar to the joystick, but the Omni does not have a horn switch, so we cannot use the horn in the on-off. So in this case, we're going to use the profile or P button on the Omni, or on the Omni 2, we're going to use this bottom left-hand soft button. So again, using the Omni to enter in the OBP, we're going to start with the power turned off. Then we're going to hold on the Omni 2, the new Omni 2, we're going to hold the lower left P. Again, instead of the horn, we're going to use the lower left P, soft key. Or on the Omni, the original Omni, there's a P, which is for profile. While we hold that one, we hold the on-off. Okay, again, upper left-hand corner of the Omni 2 and the green circle one on the original Omni. You wait for the beep, and then you release the lower left key. Okay, and the P, and then you wait for the beep, and then you release the on-off. So let's go ahead and show you what that looks like. I'm going to bring my device over here. Okay, and we're going to switch this so that we can see it. So this is the original Omni I've got here on my table, and I'm going to hold, this is the P button right here. I'm going to hold the P button and the on-off button. Okay, first the P, then the on-off. You wait for the beep, let go of the P, wait for another beep, let go of the on-off, and then you'll see this timer, and it goes into the onboard programming menu. Now, this top one here says Omni. This is one that is added anytime you have an Omni on the system. You have additional menu items for the Omni itself. If you do not have the Omni plugged in, these will not show up on the joystick. It only if the Omni is plugged in, then you will see these items. So that is how you get into it. Again, I'll show you again. Oops, let me turn this back. Okay, so with the power turned off, start with the P, then the on-off. And just like that, you jump into the Omni program. Now, the keys down here at the bottom, let me lighten this up so you can see it. Okay, the keys here at the bottom, these are your navigation keys. All right, and then you have your right and your left, okay? And then if you wanted to make changes, you can make changes with the up and down or the plus and minus keys here. And that's how you make changes in onboard programming. Okay, to the onboard menu for the Omni itself. So under the Omni yourself, the first thing you're going to want to do is to define the profiles and the ports that are going to be used for those profiles. Why? What am I talking about? Well, let's just go in here and look. I think it'll be easier for me just to go ahead and show you. So under Omni, there is one called Profile, and then you'll see that it says Profile across the top, and then it says Ports. All right. Now, we typically, again, you're going to use Profile 6 and 7. So setting up these other ports for these other profiles that are for joystick really are not going to matter at all. The only ones you're really going to care about is Profile 6 and 7. Now, when we talk about the ports themselves, on the bottom of the Omni or the Omni 2 box, there are actually two sets of ports, port 1 and port 2. Okay, you can see those, they're listed on here, but the port 1 is on the left and port 2 is on the right. There is also ports that we use for sip and puff and user jacks, which I'll talk about here in a minute, but understanding when you set port 1 and port 2, you're setting up for primarily these two ports on the bottom. Okay, so let's look at what those ports, well, let me go back here. So what you need to do is you need to tell the profile that you're working with which port you want to use. So let me go ahead and go back into this so that you can see this on the actual camera. I can find it. Here it is. Okay, go back into here. And if we go back, so here's my profiled. And here again, you see port 1 is assigned to profile 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, we're only using profile 7 and profile 8, so the other ones really aren't going to matter. But let's say somebody wants to use two input devices on the same chair. And that may seem odd because you typically only need one input device, a joystick, chin control, head control, whatever. But you may find individuals who outdoor can use a specialty input device easier in outdoor mode than they can in indoor mode. Maybe the indoor mode works better with a proportional device, but outdoor they want to just latch the system in a switch control, and they just want to be able to have wide open spaces. They can just use that instead. Maybe because they're bouncing around or whatever, it's difficult for them to use a chin control because it moves out of place. But maybe a head control or a sip and puff is much easier to use outdoor in that type of environment. So depending on the type of environment they have, they may want to use two different input devices. Well, you could set number 6, you could set that up because that's my indoor. I can set that up for port 1, and port number 2, I can set up for profile number 7. Again, the ability to have flexibility to have two different input devices. The other thing that's nice is if you have a chair that you're setting up for demo purposes, you could set one of the input devices up as a switch drive and one as a proportional drive. That way you can have both devices plugged in on the chair. You can easily switch back and forth between those, and you can see, you can trial somebody easily by doing that. So it's a way that you can make it custom and also flexible during those in-services or during those trials with people. Okay. So let's look now at the type of input devices that we can put on these chairs. So again, under the port 1 and port 2, and regardless of which one you're going to use one of these two ports, you have the capability to define the input device that you are going to use. So on this case, we're going to look at port 1, and we have the option to have, first of all, a switch style of joystick. Well, actually, we're going to first of all talk about sip and puff. Sip and puff gives you the ability, with 4 different breath controls, you can actually control the chair. So you use that by either sipping, either a soft sip or a hard sip, or a soft puff or a hard puff. And you define that under the global settings. We're not going to go into setting up sip and puff. It's not used very often anymore. There's so many more better options with micro joysticks and head controls. Most people are moving away from sip and puff, but it is still used, but we're just not going to cover it here. So what we're going to do on a sip and puff, we're going to plug that tube into a pneumatic port that's actually on the Omni itself. It's either going to be on the Omni 1 or the new Omni 2, but it's the same. It plugs directly into the Omni itself. Okay. Also, you have a switch control, which we use for scanner. Now, what's a scanner? The scanner is a device that allows you to use just a single switch to control everything on the chair. With one single switch, you're going to control the chair. Again, I like sip and puff. It's not used very much anymore because it is difficult to learn and difficult to navigate a chair that has a scanner option. This requires the user to only be able to activate a single switch. And what happens is on the display, when you're using a scanner, you end up with 4 arrows that rotate like a clock around on the display. It'll go from forward to right to reverse to left and then back to forward. The end user has to wait until the arrow reaches the direction in which they want to go. Then they correspondingly push the button in order to go in that direction. Okay, so we're going to plug that directly into the user jack. We're going to use the user jack for other things as well, but that's where that would go if you're going to use a scanner. And then we have a switch option. So there are two different types of devices that we plug in. There's a switch and then there's proportional. Both of those devices are ones that we can plug in. And we're going to plug those into the 9-way connectors on the bottom. We call it a 9-way because there are 9 pins inside of this connector. This connector is shaped like a D or like a trapezoid, and the corresponding device, input device will plug directly into it. If you do a full switch, and you set this up as full switch, then it allows you to have 4 switches on the chair, 1 for each direction, and simply push the button in that direction and you go in that direction. If you combine like a left and a forward, you can get a little bit of veer in those directions as well. But that's what we're going to do when we set it up as switch. We also have an option to set it up as 3-switch, and we're going to talk more in detail about how to do 3-switch operation. Now, when it comes to switch control, if you do need to use a scanner or any of the other switches that we're going to talk about, Sunrise has a whole bunch of options to choose from. You have your larger buddy button and egg switch. These are really good for people with gross motor and difficult targeting where they have to hit a button without much precision. Those are large buttons that make it very easy. We have smaller buttons like a microlight. The microlight allows you to dial in very sensitive touch for very light touch for somebody with not much strength. We have the Pico button, which is kind of halfway in between these. These are new switches. Great thing. They come in multicolors. They're very positive in their feel. They're not so large, so that you can place them easier around the chair. And then we even have some smaller switches like the twister switch. This switch, the nice thing about this, it comes on a nice little long bat that you can put this somewhere on the chair where it can be easily activated by somebody without having to have any bulky hardware. We have the fiber optic switch. Again, this is like with the OptiStop. We use this fiber optic switch, and what it does is it just has a beam, a little light beam, and you just come close to it and you break the beam, break the light beam, and it makes the contact and makes the selection. So it's very, very light touch. Actually, it's just almost zero touch coming up to it. We also have a flex switch, and inside of the flex switch is a proximity switch, and we have just what we call bare naked switches, which are without this housing. Allows you to basically not even have to touch. You just have to come near it, and it's a proximity switch. You just come near it, and it will actually activate that switch. And then we have very small switches like these little mini buttons as well that are available. These switches can be mounted on our linkage system in multiple locations with a lot of flexibility. We have modules and rods, special star where you can add multiples together. We have mounting brackets that mount to the bottom of the armrest in various locations. You can actually see in this picture, we can mount it to the headrest. We can mount it off of the thigh support, off where the knee may mount. And we have all of these various rods and modules that give us that flexibility. So a ton of flexibility when it comes to the switches on these devices. Okay. So now let's continue on with our specialty input device selection. We now are going to look at the proportional devices. So we're talking about proportional devices. These are like the joysticks, so that it's not just a switch input where it's a digital on-off. We have this proportionality. The further you move the joystick, the harder you press on it, the faster it's going to go. There are a lot of ways that we can do that. There is a full proportional device, again, that gives you full proportionality in all 4 directions. And then we also have a 3 proportional. Again, just like the head control that we would have with switches, we can do just 3 directions. Again, we need to worry about how we're going to do reverse. We're going to talk about that as well. And again, either port 1 or port 2 will work with that. And then lastly, one of the input devices that we have as a selection is what we call external buttons. It'll just say EXB for external buttons. The external buttons gives us the ability to put in just a 5-switch device directly into that port. It gives you the ability through assignable buttons to set those 5 switches up to do multiple tasks that could be used on the chair. All right, so when it comes to proportionality, again, Switch It offers multiple devices. It should be noted again that anytime somebody orders a Switch It device, we include the Omni 2 at no charge. If you go off the script and you use somebody else's device or even one of the all-around devices that we offer, you do have the upcharge for the Omni 2 on chair. So what we have to offer, we got these micro guides. These are very small devices, about the size of a AA battery, very easy to mount in multiple locations. We do offer a Versa guide, which is just like a joystick inside of a can. You can get a standard one or one that's light touch. And the touch drive is unique for us. This is just like you would use on your phone or on an iPad, where all it takes is your hand on the device and you drag your hand across the device in any direction, and the chair will drive in that direction. Really great choices for proportionality. We also have the all-around joysticks both in the standard and in the light. Again, those are very similar to the Switch It versions, but those are available on chair as well. One of the things that we have that are unique is we also offer head controls that are proportional. A traditional head control is just going to be a switch type device. It's digital. It's on and off. Where our Dual Pro and our rim control give you proportionality within the head control. So you don't lose the proportionality advantage, and you can gain the advantage of having the proportionality built into the head control. Couple things we also offer. We do offer the heavy duty, which is a large joystick inside of a standard RNet system. This does not require the Omni, but I just thought I would put this on here so that you can remind you that we do have that option for people with really gross movements and really are hard on joysticks. This is something that'll stand up to the test of their strength. And then lastly, we have a device called Cool Cube. The Cool Cube uses these Pro Spot buttons. We don't call them switches because they're not switches. They don't just on off. They are buttons. And so as you increase the strength or the pressure on these buttons, you have proportionality that is built into the system, and you can actually control the chair through proportionality by using these Pro Spot buttons. Okay, mounting again is a big deal with our linkage system. You can mount these proportional devices all over the chair, including off the backrest, off the armrest, off the around the chin, off the head control. We've got swing away booms that'll power the boom out of the way for the end user. All of those are available. We can mount those in trays. We have a small one here, and we also offer the standard RNet joystick in a tray. All of those are great features. And again, off the headrest with a swing away mount gives you the capability to easily combine a chin control with the Linkit Pico switches or any of the other head switches, so that people can have full functionality on their chair directly off of their head control. Now let's talk, I'm going to shift gears, and we're going to talk specifically about head controls, because head controls are used quite often, and they many times can be very difficult to set up if you do not know what the parameters are that are available. For our line of chairs, we have, again, these three styles of head controls. We have what we call just a switch style head control, again, a digital on-off type of device. We have a proportional head array, which has the three proximity and pressure sensors that are in the head control, which gives you both the ability to have switch and proportional. And then we have just a proportional only device called the rim control that's also available. Okay, so when operating a head array, you have a couple options. You can set it up as full switch or full proportional, or you can set it up as a 3 switch or 3 proportional. So first of all, we're going to talk about a full switch or full proportional. Now I already mentioned that typically with a head control, you set it up as a 3 switch because you only have 3 pads. Okay, but you can set it up as full switch or full proportional if you use a dedicated switch for driving in reverse. So let's think about that. You have a left, you have a right, and you have a rear pad. You have the ability to drive forward. You have the ability to drive right and left with the 2 pads. If we introduce a dedicated switch
we can use the dedicated switch to do reverse. So how can those be mounted? Well, first of all, you can mount those on the actual side wings themselves. So you can see there's actually, we've labeled them here. You can have it either on the right or on the left pad. If on these front ones, you want to have the ability to drive in reverse, you can set this up so that front half of the wing will drive it in the reverse. When somebody's driving their chair normally, their head is going to be in contact with these three in the back. As they move their head to the forward, they can just simply lean forward. They can tap on these this switch, and then they can drive in reverse. Likewise, on our proportional device on the Dual Pro, you can set an additional switch up here in the front to actually control reverse. And you can set that up on either the left or the right. Okay. Optionally, you can set up a dedicated switch that's going to be more of a chin type of switch. This can be, this down here shows it on like a Pico switch. You can mount that through the infinity mount, and then you can allow this to be offered as a chin switch. This gives somebody the ability who doesn't want to have to deal with timing or double taps or any of this other stuff to drive in reverse, to have a dedicated switch to do that. That's probably the easiest way to set it up because it doesn't require a bunch of other programming. But if somebody doesn't want to have another switch here in their proximity, we have other options as well. But those are the ways you can do it with a full switch or full proportional. If you're going to set it up as a 3 switch, or likewise a 3 proportional, there's also options you can do. So if you're going to do it as a 3 switch and 3 proportional, you could and basically you're going to use the rear pad to do both forward and reverse. You can basically set this up in a couple of ways. First, you can toggle that rear pad with a switch. Okay, just like before, you have the options in the head array or in the chin that you can actually set that up so when you tap on that, the rear pad now becomes reverse. So you're just going to toggle that by using a switch. Again, it can be on the 5th switch on the head control, or it can be on a dedicated switch. All right, so those are the kind of options you have for doing that. That's one of the ways, okay? Or the last way that we have is that we're going to use the rear pad and we're going to toggle forward and reverse by using the rear pad itself. Okay, so basically by using a tap, we're going to actually use that in order to get in and out of reverse. All right, so in discussing how we're going to set up the head control to do reverse driving, I felt it was necessary for us to kind of create a matrix of the controls that are set up and the types and the way that we're going to get in and out of reverse. I did this because I'm a visual person, and to me it made the most sense to do it this way, and I think it'll help you as well. So what we have here is this matrix. Okay, we're talking about a 3-axis control, so you can see this is for a 3-axis control. And then across the top here goes, how are we going to toggle the reverse? How are we going to access the menu? And again, the menu gives us the options to go in and set up for, or to select the modes, profiles, speeds, all of those types of things. And then we have our controls and our switches settings that are to the right. All right, so again, we need to do make changes in both the controls menu and the switches menu that are in the Omni onboard programming. So the first thing we're going to do is say, okay, if we want to use the 5th switch or a user switch to toggle the head control. Again, I'm talking about a 3-axis head control, and it could be either a switch or it could be a proportional head control, but it only has 3 axes. So how am I going to toggle that reverse so that that pad in the rear is going to allow me to drive in reverse? So if my choice is, hey, you know what, let's use a 5th switch or maybe a user switch. So we're going to either use a chin control or a chin switch in order to toggle the rear pad, or we're going to use something maybe in the head control itself, a fifth switch there. Either way, this works the same. So we're going to use either an independent switch or to basically toggle those directions forward and reverse. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is under the forward reverse auto toggle, under controls, we're going to set that to off. That's going to be our trigger that we're going to use to switch and not the back pad in order to switch and toggle that rear pad to go reverse. And our options here is that we can use either a timeout on that switch that we're using, or we can use a double click on that as well. So those are the two options we have. A timeout, if we go back to the medium switch, oops. Okay, if we go back to the medium time, we set this time, and as we hold that fifth switch or user switch down, if we hold it down for the specified amount of time, it'll actually jump us into the menu access. Any press on that button, any momentary press on that button switches it from forward to reverse. Okay, any hold of that time will actually make it go into the menu item. So let's look at what that one looks like first before we go in and talk about the others. So if I go back, all right, and if I bring this down so that we can see the settings, okay, so what we have here, and I've got a little four-way toggle here that I'm going to use. If you don't have one of these four-way toggles, it's really handy when you're trying to set up a switch device, because what it does is it simulates what the head control would normally do. So I have my forward, my reverse, my left on here, and if in this case, because I'm using a 3 switch, this number 3 or the reverse switch is not going to do anything. And it also gives me the 5th switch that I can use for trialing the setup. So if you're trying to set up a head control, if you don't have one of these, we have these in stock. These make it really easy. Also, you can do things like seating and everything else on these. But it's just really easy for us to use this to demonstrate here because, obviously my camera's in a confined location. So I'm just going to use this to simulate my 3-axis head control. Okay, so the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to go under my port 1. I'm going to go to controls. All right, and under controls, I'm going to go down to where it says forward reverse auto toggle. Okay, and I'm going to select that to off. Okay, that's going to tell me up here, that this is going to, I've now selected the 5th switch is going to be my selection device to turn it from forward to reverse. Okay, I'm also going to go back out of here, and then I'm going to go to my switches, and I'm going to go to medium time. And right now it's set at 0, but I'm going to increase that. Excuse me. So I'm going to go to my switch medium, and I'm going to select, and let's put this, say, at like 1 second. Okay, and then we're going to go back out. All right, you can see that there's an arrow here. It says it's a green arrow going forward. That means when I hit the joystick, okay, forward, it's going to drive forward. You can see that if I hit it backwards, it does absolutely nothing. My left one will turn left, my right one turns right, and my forward is actually going to drive it forward. If I want to go in reverse, because I've got this set up as a dedicated switch, I hit the 5th switch, and as I tap it, and then it says reverse. So I tap it, and now it goes forward. Every time I tap it, it's going to change directions. Okay, if I press and hold the button down, then it goes into my menu, and from here I can go in and I can select whether or not I want to adjust my speed. I want to go to Bluetooth, if I do want to go to indoor, outdoor, if I want to go into seating. It gives me all of those options. Again, I press and hold the button down, it takes me back into drive. I press and hold it down, and it goes to menu. Okay, I go into my drive and I press momentarily, and every time I press it momentarily, it changes directions. All right, so if the individual you're setting up can use a fifth switch or a dedicated switch off the chin or something, and they can use that with their 3-axis head control, they have the ability to use just that switch for multiple things. I can just tap it once and it changes my direction of my rear pad. I can press and hold it down and it takes me into my menu so that I can change my modes and profiles. Right? So that's how you set up a joystick, or that's how you set up a head control to work with a standard 3-switch with a fifth switch to do that. Now, don't want to use the medium time. Maybe they want to use a double click instead. So let's go back here and look at this. All right. The other option you have is you're going to set it up for the double click. And in this case, we're going to turn the medium time back to off. And now we're going to select the double click time in the under double click time under switches. Okay, so let's look what that looks like. Now I'm going to take the switch medium. I'm going to turn it all the way off. Okay, and now I'm going to set the double click time. Currently it's set to ½ second. So we're going to leave it there and we're going to try that. So we go all the way back out. Now we're all the way back out. Instead of press and hold in order to get into menu, and again, I hit the button once, it's still going to do the direction change. But in order to get into menu, now I'm going to double click it. So if I hit the button twice, it takes me into that. Let me take this to it so you can see it a little better. So I can take it, I click it twice, it takes me in and out of the menu. I press it once, and it changes the direction. So if somebody doesn't want to use the switch medium, you have the option to use the double click in order to get in and out of the menu. So those are the two ways you would do that using a fifth switch. Now let's say maybe somebody doesn't want to use a fifth switch. Instead, they want to use the back pad to toggle in and out. But now if we want to not use a switch to go in and out of reverse, instead we want to use the back pad itself, then this is how we're going to set it up here. Okay, so we're going to first of all turn the forward reverse auto toggle time. We're going to set that back to on, not time, but the forward reverse auto toggle. We're going to set that to on. Okay, and when we do that, we have a couple of options. We can set the timeout to menu to turn it off, and if you do that, it still requires you to use a user switch to get in and out of the menu. Okay, the other option is to use a timeout instead. A timeout allows you to use just simple time in order to get in and out of the menu itself. So let's look at those two options and see what they look like on the programming. So I will switch back to the camera again so you can see that. Okay, so we're going to go in here and we're going to go into our programming. We're going to go into Omni. Okay, we're going to go into port 1 because that's where we're working. We're going to go into, first of all, go into controls. And now we're going to go down and we're going to turn forward reverse auto toggle. Okay, we're going to turn that to on. And then we're going to turn off timeout to menu. Make sure that's at 0, which it is. Okay. All right. And then let's go out and see what this looks like. All right. So now with my little 3 switch, I'm going to show you how we're going to do this. See if we can get this lightened up. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is every time we hit the user switch, okay, it still takes us in and out of the menu. But now all I have to do, if I go in here so I can drive, if I click on this, if I click on my forward, okay, you can see the arrow goes to reverse. But it doesn't stay there. It goes off, and then it clicks back on. Now I can set up that how much time that is using the reverse toggle time here. I can set how long will it stay in that direction. Okay, but what this is going to do is if say I'm going forward and I want to go reverse, I come to a stop, I click the back head pad, and then I hit it again. When I hit it again, it's selected reverse and it stayed in the reverse direction so that when I drive the chair, it'll now drive in reverse. If I want to go back forward again, I click it and then I give it a command and now it'll go forward. So this way I don't need to use another switch. I'm using my back pad. I'm driving along. I don't have to find the other switch to go in reverse. I simply tap the pad and give it a command and now the chair will drive in that direction. I tap it again and I hit it again and it goes in forward. Now you can make this so it toggles forward, reverse, and you have to select it. That can be very difficult to do. It's easier to be able to hit the button and then drive it again. In this case, it still requires me to use a fifth button to get in and out of my menus, but my forward and reverse is done by the back pad itself. The other option I have is, go back to here, okay, is I have the option to set it for a timeout. So if I go back into my menu, I can go into my Omni, back into port 1, into controls, all right, and then I go down to where it says I turn the timeout to menu. Currently is at off. If I set this at say 2 seconds and then I come back out, now it's going to work very similar to the standby function we talked about before. But instead of going to standby, it just simply times me out and then it goes into the menu. Now, it automatically takes me to the drive menu. So if I give it a drive command here, I give it a right command, it's going to take me into drive and I can drive the chair. And again, I have the ability to forward reverse, change with my rear toggle. But if I don't do anything for the 3 seconds, then it jumps me back into the menu. So this gives the ability for somebody who does not want a switch at all. They don't want to have to use a fifth switch. They can simply just use the timeout function to take them in and out of that menu. So now they can drive their 3-switch head control with just the 3 switches and none other. You can also set it so it can go to sleep and then the chair will basically turn off. Okay? Now, the challenge here is, how do you turn it back on? Well, the way that you turn this on, you give it a right, a left, a right, a left, and then it turns back on. So again, the challenge here is that we want to be able to maybe give the person driving the chair the ability to use their chair with only the 3 switches. Minimize the number of switches that are up around their head or in their face. They can simply use, they can simply use the sleep function. Right click it, it'll go to sleep, the chair will shut off. All right, now they can rest their head on the head pad without any concerns. When they're ready to drive, they just give it a right, a left, a right, a left, a right, and then it turns it back on. Ready to drive again. And again, you can use that timeout to menu in order to get in and out of the various functions. Okay. So again, setting a 3-axis head control has a lot of options in it for somebody. These I feel are probably the most common, the way to use. If you can use a 5th switch, it makes it the most straightforward to do. If you don't have a switch, you can use the back pad to toggle in and out of reverse. If you want to use a switch to do that, you can. If you don't want to use a switch at all to get in and out of the menu, then use timeout in order to do that. In all these cases, if you have a switch, there is a switch long time that you can set up. If you press the switch long time to the entire time, it'll also go to sleep, and the chair can then be turned back on using the switch. So this is, I think, is a good way to trial this. I encourage you to try this, but also when you're trying to train people with it, to kind of use this approach when doing so. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is how to adjust the seating of the chair when using a 3-axis control. All right, because you don't have, again, a forward and reverse command, and if you're in a head control and you tilt and or recline the chair, your head is going to be resting on that pad. How are you going to drive the chair back up? How are you going to do toggles? How are you going to control seating? So it's important to understand the options that we have available when it comes to using the seating controls. The first thing we're going to do is under the controls setting, there is an actuator selection. The actuator selection is once you get into mode 2, which is the seating mode, how are you going to select which axis you want to use? Which selection, which seating function do you want to use? Now, and how do you select that? Well, the way you do that, you have a couple options. You can use a switch, okay, to do that. Again, a 5th switch will take you through all of the options if you have a switch. You can also use the actual head control itself or whatever specialty input device you have to actually select the seating axes. When you do that, you actually have multiple options that you can do for axis control. You can use the normal one, which means you're going to have to use that rear pad to both go in, to move into tilt and then back out of tilt. A good option is to use either the left-right or the right-left. What this does is it's going to use either the left pad to select which seating axis you want and the right pad to drive it. That means the rear pad is turned off and you can rest your head on the back of the headrest while you're going into tilt or into recline. That way they don't have to hold their head up when they're doing their pressure reliefs. They can rest their head back on the pad comfortably just using the left and right pads to go in and out of that seating function. And then you can swap if you want. Again, not the best because you're going to have to use that rear pad to do that. So let's look at how this works on the chair, and then there is an axis toggle time as well. But let's look at our example with our chair so that you can see how this is going to work. So we're going to go back into our menu. Okay. That's right, I turned it off, so now I need to go back into my onboard programming functionality. I'm going to go into Omni, turn this so you can see it, okay? We're going to go into, move this up so we can see what those options are. We're going to go into the port 1. Okay, we're going to go into controls. And this is where our actuator setup is. So first of all, do we want to select the actuator using the SID or do we want to use the switch? So we have two options there. Okay, if we use the switch, it's very straightforward. We're going to use just the 5th switch to do that. But because it's common to use the SID, we're going to set this up for SID. Now, if I set this again to normal, that means I'm going to have to use that rear pad in order to activate the seating. But we don't want to do that. Instead, we're going to set this to either left-right or right-left. In our case, we'll do right-left. And then we have an auto toggle time that we can set. We'll set that to, say, 5 seconds. Okay. Now, when we come out, all right, all the way back out, go back into our driving. Now we have our timeout to menu. Okay, so I'm going to go up and select seating. All right, and I'm going to go into seating. Now I'm in seating. Okay. Well, let me pause that so that we can take this back. We're going to take this back out of the menu because it doesn't give me enough time to discuss this. Many times you have to do this over and over. I say we're going to go timeout to menu. We're going to set that back to 0. Okay, so now we're going to go in and we're going to hit our 5th button. Okay, it takes us into our options. We're going to go to seating. Now, the forward button is actually, or the rear pad does absolutely nothing. Okay, but when I go to the left, if I go to the right, I can actually select which axis I want. Once I reach an axis that I desire, say it's lift, then I'm going to use the left one to actually drive the actuator. And if I tap it, then it's going to go the opposite direction. I tap it and it goes back down. I tap it and it goes forward. And again, I have the ability to set that tap time so it'll work better. So it gives me the option to do that. Again, I'm going to change directions. Okay. The right direction gives me the ability to change which axes I want to go into. My front pad is completely dead. So this gives me the ability when I'm on the headrest and I want to basically go in and out of my seating, I can use that back pad to rest on, just use a left and right command to go in and out of those seating functions. Okay, in summary, we've talked about the joystick settings, how to go into the user settings, setting the display, setting the sounds, and the options within the joystick setting. We talked about the joystick onboard programming, how to get into the device, into the programming, how to change the programming menu, how to change the global parameters and the profile parameters. All the modes, setting up the joystick throughout all the functionality of that, and how to use standby. And we also talked about the Omni, the onboard programming functionality, including the input devices and how to set up a head array. And I just want to thank you today for your time. Goodbye.